So for today's meeting, because of the construction that will be happening here, some of our equipment is not functioning, so we have the camera and microphone back there, so public, for you guys up front, it may not pick you up too bad, but if you talk, it might pick you up over us, so if you have comments or whatnot, just try to, I mean, obviously we'll have public comment, but if you speak amongst yourselves, it might pick you up over us, so just be mindful of that, and then we'll have to try to speak up so it can reach, so. With that, it is 6:35. We'll call the meeting to order. If we could please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Pam Mazik.
Here.
Ray Curtin.
Here.
Ryan Matson.
Here.
Glenn Mitchell.
Here.
Derek Burton. Derek's not here anymore. I'm sorry.
He's really good.
Excused.
Mike McCanny. Kelly Fletcher. Steve Ruth.
Karen and I spoke earlier. Kelly was not feeling well, and Mike had a conflict, something come up, and then I believe Steve's not here because he has the Tuesday conflict and why we're switching to Wednesdays, so I'll make a motion to excuse Kelly, Mike, and excuse me, Steve from tonight's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Agenda approval. Any edits you all may have seen or issues from our last meeting's agenda?
Motion, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented for the May 7th meeting.
Second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Public comment. So this is the opportunity for the public to come up and speak for agenda items only. We will have another public comment for any and all items. You'll be provided 3 minutes. If approved by the commission, you can be provided an additional 3 minutes. We ask that your comments be addressed to the commission and the chair. Please, when you get to the podium, state your name and address, and your time will begin. So anyone for public comment on agenda items?
We don't have an agenda.
Oh, there's some right out here. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna have something on the master plan of the
Okay.
courthouse. My name is John Scarborough. I'm representing the Racones, who have actually submitted an appeal to the Great Lakes Country Club Zoning Commission in Holland Township. And just wanted to talk about this, and I know this may not be the meeting. I know there's an additional meeting to be held, I think, sometime in 2 weeks from now or so. But just wanted to talk about the fact that, obviously the Racones have submitted it. They were denied the first time. We've been working with Township, Karen particularly, and I think we have also spoke with the attorney that represents the Township at one time earlier or later last year. And so what we're asking here is, and I think the Township actually submitted I don't want to say a bid, but they actually hired a planner to take a look at the master plan to see where we are. And as everyone knows, Great Lakes was, I guess, started back in 1938, but things were a little different. There's approximately 64 homes in the subdivision, and what the Racones are asking for, I think it's come down to this. We submitted 5 variances at one point, but we're down to 1 variance. It's based on what the plan is suggesting, and I think it's clear that this still goes up to the board on both sides to make the final decision of this. But what we're asking for we're asking for the variance to come from 50 feet to 29.8 feet, which is consistent with almost all the properties within the subdivision. So we're not asking for anything that's different than others that I think, well, I see it on the board here. We're hoping that this one variance will be granted so that we can do this. Because without that, obviously, that lot, as well as many other lots within the subdivision are unbuildable. Now, I do understand the SR designation, and I do understand the historic designation for those lots in there. And when you look at it, and I think I offered it to the board members, especially on the zoning board, to take a look at it if anyone's not truly familiar with the property, to see that the configuration is unique in that even though there's a 50-foot setback requirement, if we were to stick to that, that makes the properties 100 feet from the next property. However, because of the configuration of this property, the next house would be over 200 feet from the rear. There's a large space that goes down between them, and there's nothing there at all. So that's why we're hoping that the township would grant this when that time comes. Do we have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I can speak for a second.
Sure. So,
Okay.
all set?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I'm Dan Ricone, I'm owner of lot 23 and 24. And, as was stated, if you go up to the corner there, that way, the other way. Up, right there in that curve, I'm right on that curve, right on the curve to the left. The Mrs. Fox, or Wolf, Mrs. Wolf, has suggested she has changed the front setback from 40 to 32, and she has reset the side setbacks from 15 to 7, and she did not have the power to do the backyard because that was not in her authority. From 50 to, she said she couldn't do that. So she went back and reviewed all the properties in that area, and the average was 28.3 that she has found. So she is requesting or suggesting that by doing what she has done to the front and the sides, she is requesting that the backyard be set to what is average, 28.3. And on our blueprint that was resubmitted to Oakland County and you guys will be at 29.6. So we will be in compliance with everything that she has requested. That was, by doing that, we also had to go back and re-engineer the septic field and the plotment of the house and get a variance from Oakland County, which was submitted to you guys as well, and they agreed that the septic field could be moved to accommodate Oakland County's suggestion for their new setbacks. So if you guys agree to what Oakland County has suggested, we would be in compliance fully with their suggestions. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
I'm sorry we're late.
You're fine. It's your fault.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
Go ahead and sit here.
Why don't you sit on the other side? We'll be aisle buddies.
So we're on our public comment for agenda items. I know that you've had public comments previously, so I don't know if you'd like to have the floor before you sit down or.
Are we doing public comment afterward as well?
Yes, this comment is for agenda items, and then we'll have an additional one for
Yeah.
non-agenda.
I'll wait
Okay.
until we're done.
Just want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah. I appreciate that, thank you.
No problem. Anyone
I'm
else for
sorry.
public comment for agenda items? Hearing none, seeing none? We have no public hearings, and then the approval of the minutes. Any edits or things that we saw from last meeting's minutes? Good. I'll make a motion to approve the March 5th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Support.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. We have no communications, which brings us to old business master plan review and update.
Good evening, it's
Good
nice
evening.
to see you all again. So this will actually be brief. The presentation that we've got tonight is focused on the new business items, but for the master plan, it's still in the public comment period. That will conclude just after the June planning commission meeting. So, we won't be able to have the public hearing to seek to adopt the master plan until July. But because we'll be so close to the end of the public comment period at the next meeting, I'll be able to come and summarize all the comments we've received by then. So far, we've received comments back from the road commission. That was just recently. I haven't dug into those just yet, but we also got a call from Great Lakes Cemetery, National Cemetery, just yesterday, and they're going to submit some comments as well, some revisions that they'd like to see. So I can bring a summary of all of that at the next meeting, and then we will look to schedule a public hearing to adopt the master plan in July. So part of what we'll present in the next item is kind of related to that and pushing forward all of the ideas in the master plan. And I think that's it for this one. Do you guys have any questions?
Would it be possible to have their comments before the next meeting so we could actually look at?
Yeah, we can send them along.
Both of those are major
Absolutely.
players in our township, so.
Absolutely, yep, the road commission submitted written comments, and the representative from the cemetery said that they would also do so, yeah, absolutely.
Have you received a lot or numerous comments, or above average, below average, for kind of where we're at in this stage in the game?
Yeah, so we haven't received any other public comments on the plan itself, except there was a comment submitted, I think, just today, or maybe it was yesterday, and I think that was from a resident. So we've only gotten one that is not from an entity, I guess I'll say, which, I don't know how many comments master plans usually get during the comment period, but.
I'd say it's probably pretty typical, based on the trajectory of this process that we've had. I think, once we post the public hearing notice, we'll get more.
And then, is that on our website? Can folks access that easily? Okay, awesome. Glad to hear it. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. All right, so on to new business. We have the regulating plan concept. Back again.
Yes. I probably could have stayed up here, but didn't know. Wanted to be respectful. So John is pulling up a presentation that we've prepared tonight, and we can send along a copy of that as well after tonight for your records. So we'll give up the screen a minute to catch up. But basically, this regulating plan, you've got a memo in your packets. This is a concept that we talked about at the last meeting related to the future land use plan, specifically the rural town centers. So, this has been a big topic of discussion throughout the master plan update. And what a regulating plan will do is to help make sure that the township has more specific control over different things within that area and regarding development. So.
I'm working on it, Alexis.
No problem. So, the slides have a lot of good content that we're excited to
Great
share.
content that you'll all be blown away by once I get it up and running.
and we had it up there, it was
We
ready to
sure
go.
did, didn't we? Where's our tech guy?
Is it like two screens with the drag it over?
Good.
I'll write it down here, so it's organized out.
So you want to keep the next agenda item maybe? That's the chairman.
Yeah, while John is trying to figure out the slides, we could jump to the next agenda item and whatever you guys would prefer.
Take it till
Yeah,
Jeff.
this is gonna be a pretty fun
Yeah.
time for the game. It isn't. There we go.
It might be fire or something.
There you go. Would you say
Great.
it might be?
Cooking with gas.
We're in
Could be fire.
business.
Never had fire protection.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Don't like stand right outside and start a thunder.
Gotcha. We know where you are.
Alright, so because it's been over a month since we last met, I just wanted to give a refresher of where the discussion left off. So this is just again an overview of the existing land use, 2023 for the township. You'll see that it's primarily single-family residential, but there's still quite a bit of land that is considered agricultural or recreational / conservation. So, and 16% is designated as vacant, so not being in use in any manner. And so that chunk, that ag, recreation, and vacant is quite large in comparison to other similar communities. So as the township continues to have some development interests, we want to make sure that the areas that you want to remain agricultural and recreational and remain natural, that we conserve those. So you can go to the next slide. If you remember, we did a build-out analysis of the rural town center. So this has been, like I said, the main focus of conversation over the last couple of meetings. And this is just one of those areas designated as rural town center, but it's the one that we've got some development interest right now. So it's been kind of the hot topic. And what we did is a build-out analysis based on how many acres are designated in each future land use category in that area. And this is nothing new. This is all from previous meetings. So just want to get us back into the same mindset, things that we discussed previously. And since then, if you could go to the next slide. Well, I guess I'll back up. We've been talking about density and what feels appropriate for that area. And John had put together a couple of different examples, which are in the next few slides, of what do certain densities look like. And so this is all included in the slides for reference, and you know, we can come back to these if we need to as we start talking about density. But the idea was just to demonstrate that if we want to allow multifamily or smaller units of housing types, that a certain level of density will be required for those to be permitted. And so since then, what we've worked on and what is in your packets is a regulating plan. So in the master plan, rather than list a specific density for the Rural Town Center, we revised the language to say that the ultimate density of that area will be determined through a regulating plan. And so this regulating plan will be kind of separate, but a companion to the master plan, and it will help us have more specific standards on how development is shaped and what it looks like in this area. And so just to give a definition of what is a regulating plan, what are we talking about? A regulating plan is a type of form-based code. And what a form-based code does is it looks more at the style and the form of buildings, of the street, the pedestrian area, sidewalks, things like that. And it's a more specific part of, it would be enacted through the zoning ordinance, but it's much more specific than what general zoning guidelines typically regulate. So with the little graphic that's up there, you'll see that conventional zoning, we're just saying, here is this area, it's designated as residential, there may be setbacks and certain standards of design and how things are allowed to be built, but it's pretty high level. And then there are some zoning ordinances that go a step further and offer design guidelines, so they may designate certain material types or colors that they want to see. This is common in downtowns where they want a strong, similar look and character. In a form-based code, which is kind of what we're talking about tonight, is even more specific than that. So, you know, what's in your packet tonight is kind of a first draft of what it could look like for Holly, but by no means is a final and what we're saying should be here, but we're just trying to introduce the concept. So you can go to the next slide. And this is an example of a regulating plan, what it looks like. So this is just, and what is in your packet, which is on the next couple of slides, it's showing that in this given area, we can get down to the block level rather than saying, well, this entire area or neighborhood is just zoned residentially. We're looking at each block and saying, well, in this area along maybe a more highly trafficked corridor, we want a certain style of buildings. We want them closer to the street or further away from the street. And then moving out, you can have different styles, so larger front yards, larger setbacks. And that's sort of what we've gathered from over the last couple meetings talking about density. It sounded like you guys were looking for. So being able to say that density in this area is radiating downwards as you get further away from Grange Hall. And if you can go to the next, maybe one more, these are just more examples.
Yeah, these are examples from other communities where they've used this tool. So this is sort of an example of how they've used this type of zoning or regulating plan to get specific results that they want that were acceptable to them, that involve not only density, but also the character of the development, the type of streets as Alexis was pointing out, and the type of building types as well. So these are just other examples from other communities.
Yeah. And so this is just the area that is designated Rural Town Center, just adjacent to the village. We know there are other areas that are designated Rural Town Center, but we wanted to just focus on this one to start. And what we've done is taken what you've seen in previous concept plans from the Riverside development and kind of laid it out with their road network that they are proposing, and tried to make it so that we're achieving the density, but also the form, like John said, the type of character in certain areas. So if you look at the corner of Grange Hall and Fish Lake, everything from that intersection to the east, just about to Riverside, is what we've designated as corridor mixed use. So this would look like public frontages, which are also in the next couple of slides in a certain way. So this area could be some landscaping in the front. You'll see all of the green areas designated as landscape buffer versus public frontage versus civic space. These are all terms that we can get into. And then going out from the road, whether or not certain things are permitted, we can determine through this. So in that corridor mixed use, it might not make sense to have a building right up on Grange Hall, but maybe it makes sense to have the parking in the front, buildings in the back, and versus the Main Street mixed use, where you might want something more walkable. You might want the buildings right up onto the road to create sort of the town center character that we're looking for.
So the main point of this map right here is to show that we've broken the rural town center into multiple sub-districts that can be implemented through the zoning ordinance. And this was intended to show that the densities that we discussed are going to be distributed throughout this rural town center area in a way where the maximum density is not likely to ever be achieved, but rather distributed and ultimately developed in the form of building types. So at the last meeting, I said that the density wasn't as important as the building types. And I want to walk that back a little bit. They're both very important. It's important to know what the density is, the ultimate density is, so we can plan for infrastructure improvements and all those kind of things. It's very important. But equally as important is to make sure that the development looks like something that belongs here in Holly. And this tool, again, is a way to do it. So as Alexis pointed out here, we've broken this into, basically 4 different land use districts with different standards, development standards for each. But we also incorporated some open space in this, so when a project is developed here, there's going to be an open space requirement, so that they can't just plat out the whole lot or develop the whole lot. There has to be certain types of open space for public use and community use. So I wanted to make sure that was part of it as well.
And so at the top of this red table, you'll see these are the 4 residential categories, land use categories that are in that map. And
I'm sorry, Alexis, I'm going to go back. So
yeah.
let's describe each of these districts.
Mm-hmm.
So the Main Street mixed use district is the dark purple right there to the west of Riverside Drive. And that's called Main Street. It's sort of a descriptive title. We didn't want to call it commercial because when there is a non-residential use that goes in here, we want it to have a certain character. So that's why we use these names. So Main Street sort of connotes a building to the sidewalk, you know, a certain character to it. So that dark purple right there to the west of Riverside Drive is designated as Main Street mixed use, and that is the area where most likely we would be receptive to commercial uses. Maybe mixed uses, but commercial uses would be limited to this area throughout the whole rural town center. So you're not gonna get commercial in the rural town center located up on Quick Road. It's not gonna happen because this regulating plan will make sure that it doesn't happen, as long as it's adopted in the zoning ordinance. Then the next area is the corridor mixed use, which again could be either entirely commercial or it could have some residential over the commercial. It depends. A lot of that area is you know, sort of in transition. We're not sure what's going to happen there. And then the next sort of medium purple area called mixed residential. Those are the only areas where we would anticipate townhouses or condominium type buildings, attached units and things like that. That's the only area in the entire rural town center. So in other words, you're not going to get that kind of attached residential located further north. Again, along Quick Road, I'll use that as an example. We wanted to keep those higher density areas closer to Grange Hall Road so that there's not higher density in traffic going through the single family residential neighborhood. So then the next area is the town center residential, which is, as it says, primarily residential. But it also has a character that's more consistent with the neighborhood you might see on the edge of the village, a walkable neighborhood like that single family home I showed earlier with the porch on it. It's got that character as opposed to, you know, I don't know another good example, but something you would see in out in a rural part of the township. Right, you know, it's not going to have a large house with large acres or anything like that. It's going to be a compact, small house like that. And then in this particular case, we were fortunate because we've had some concept sketches for this area to show where the open spaces could be. So that's the open spaces as well.
And so, in this red table, we've got what could be permitted densities in each of these, and it's also, you'll see on the left-hand side, how the type of development, is it permitted by right? These are the densities that you can achieve if you're just going straight zoning, permitted by right, versus a cluster land option, which is another kind of development tool within the zoning ordinance. And then the transfer of the development rights. So these are three different paths for development through the zoning ordinance. And, you know, some of this, the transfer of development rights are not codified in the zoning ordinance as of right now. Yeah, not yet. The idea is that we're gonna kind of go through all of these changes as we're completing the master plan. The next step is to make zoning ordinance updates, and that could be part of what we do, is to enact this regulating plan as well as a transfer of development rights program or tool, which would, you know, not to kind of go down the rabbit hole, but just to be clear, that tool is to conserve all of the agricultural and natural areas in the rest of the township and concentrate some of this density in this area so that the other areas don't get eaten up by subdivisions, right? Which we know that the township does not want. And John's got some examples of what these densities could look like.
So these are more examples of building types that you might see in those areas on regulating plan. So these are what you might see in the single family areas, the town center residential. I've got some examples of the type of development we'd like to see, and then I've also got some scary ones of what you might see if we don't put this type of regulating plan in
So
place.
with this picture here, where are they parking? They just have garages and that's all, and it's like one lane between the houses?
So you can see the driveways here, the garages are located behind the houses. This is a relatively new project. This is a relatively new project, way away from here in Milford. So this is relatively new, but here's another one. And, you know, I know that people may have reservations about detached garages in the back. So, I want to be realistic and say there's forms of development that are appropriate that have garages that are attached. I don't want to be a total maniacal fanatic about this, so there's definitely some options. But this is what we don't want. And this is a project that was relatively recently approved in Washtenaw County. So this is the kind of thing that if we don't have proper standards in place, this is the kind of development we could get, and we don't want it. And these are all comparable densities. This is a little bit better. This is a townhouse. This would be something in that medium area, the mixed residential area. This is a little bit better. It's got a little bit of character to it, but it's, still we can do way better than this. Here's something, again, in terms of townhouses, attached residential, that could be in that mixed residential area. Again, recognizing the consumer's desire to have attached garages, but still have some of that character that's compatible with the architecture vernacular around Holly Township. This would be even more preferable, I think. These are townhouses, again, in that way off land of Wixom. So, it's been done locally, relatively locally.
I see no driveways there whatsoever.
They're in the back. The garages are located in the back, the parking areas are in the back. So, and they're all attached. All the garages are attached.
I'm assuming it's a separate street.
It's
Like a separate
basically,
alleyway.
there's basically a road
Yeah.
right before you get there that goes behind it, and then there's the driveways that go into the garages.
Your very first image, do you?
The very
you may-
first?
Yeah, the very first one, you may or may not know. What's the dwellings per acre estimate you think that is?
I'd say it's comparable to the single family in that first one. What did we say that was? Sorry. Oh my God. I'd say it's no more than this. 17 dwelling units per acre. Oh, no, I'm sorry. 4 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, 4 dwellings, that's it.
Yeah.
4 dwellings.
Just curious, thank
Yep.
you. Sorry, I know I made you
No, that's
trail
okay.
back quite a bit, so I apologize.
It's all good.
Crowded.
So this would be more consistent with that apartment, that I showed that's here in the village. So what's that, 8 units per acre, maybe 6 to 8?
Now, is that apartments or like condos?
What do you think? Do you think they're
I
more
see.
occupied, or do you
I
think
see.
they're
I think
Apartments?
they're
apartments?
condo / townhouse is my
Or,
thought.
yeah.
So do you think the people that live there rent them, or do you think they own them? Or do you think some people own them and then rent them?
All
All the above.
Yeah.
That all goes on here,
Yeah.
guaranteed. Guaranteed. And it looks like that. Here are some others that are right on Milford Road. So this might be the kind of mixed residential that you'd see out on Grange Hall Road. You can see there's more of a setback, the landscaped area before you get to the sidewalk, and then the units are set back more. Whereas this has, the narrower street, the slower speeds, this would be within the development, the roads. Some more examples. And again, the parking is in a garage behind the unit. Here's some commercial examples. You know, again, this is what you get when you have general commercial zoning. You get a big parking lot in front that's underutilized. You know, you don't get a lot of landscaping. Maybe out in the front you get some buffering, but you know, nothing within the development. And we've seen a lot of these over the years in many communities.
That previous slide, is there any backyard that have, or is it all parking
The
garages?
parking lot.
These are not, on the single family homes that I
That I
showed,
showed before this goes.
on the single family homes that I showed, these have backyards. These have backyards. Okay?
But yet, all the parking's behind the buildings. I just
Not on
wonder what it
these.
looks like
Not
behind
on
the
these.
buildings.
Not on these.
Oh, that's right,
These have backyards
Sorry.
with a deck, with a grill,
Okay.
with a place you can, they're fenced in yards, you can let the dog out to run around.
It's
That-
the multi-units that don't have backyards.
That's right.
I mean, these to me seem more similar to like your older neighborhoods, like you would see in Royal Oak or whatever, where,
Or Holly.
or even.
The village of Holly,
Some in
right?
Holly, yes.
Yeah.
Or anywhere,
No.
the older neighborhoods.
Hang on a sec, I'm gonna, bear with me. Sorry. Alright. This was taken in Holland. This is in Holland. It's got a detached garage. It's got a yard in the back. This is what we're trying to build off of, as opposed to, sorry, as opposed to this.
Definitely.
And this happens. This is brand spanking new. You know?
Now, does this have a decent sized, backyard or, you know, yard?
No, it's got a crappy shared backyard. It's got a community open space. You can run your dog back there, but you know, it's not really consistent with the lifestyle that I've heard is desirable here. So this is not, I don't think, what people want, but
Is there actually people living there at the time that picture was taken, or is that before the people moved in? I just can't believe we don't see a car in the whole, well, maybe the very end of the street, but just.
No, that's probably constructed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think of this? These are detached units. There's open space in the back, or, you know, there's yards in the back. Is this horrible?
I mean, I think it definitely fits the aesthetic, but, you know, better. You know, the current Riverside development that's there kind of has the same similar feel.
Well, what I liked about it on the others is that actually the houses are different, they're not all
Yeah.
look the same, it's like, which one is mine, I gotta count how many doors down.
Yeah.
Cause that one you just look at it, and that one you go, how would you know your house almost for that, they all look the same.
Yeah.
So here are some commercial examples, and again, you know, this is served communities well and customers well for years. Banks would approve these no problem without even double checking. It was a formula, and bam, you get your commercial development loan, got your property, you had your parking ratios, you were good to go. But they're sort of, you know, struggling now. They're struggling because there's better options out there. This is another example of something that does not work. This was, I think I was talking to you guys about this last time. This is Novi Road near Grand River, where there's a disconnect. They did have regulations in Novi. They said, we want you to build your building close to the sidewalk, because we want that downtown feel. But they said, there's no way in the world that we're gonna let you park a car on Novi Road. You know, there's no way. So what happened is they built these buildings right next to the road, but if you look closely, all that glass right there, there's not a single door there. I mean, they've gone so far as to put a table and chair out there. No one ever sits there. No one ever sits in that bench because there's no interaction between people stopping to shop there and going in here. This is the back of the building for all practical purposes. But they spent a ton of money on the architecture and the embellishments and all the other stuff to make it look like that. So this is not really a sustainable option either.
No, it's not very welcoming if you wanted to go into a business.
Right. Here's an example in Canton, Cherry Hill Village. And this is more consistent with what we're talking about in that this road you see on the left might very well be Grange Hall Road, right? And then this road that comes off, tees into it to the right, might be the drive that leads into the development, not Riverside, but the next road down. And you can see that these buildings, they face Grange Hall Road to the left, but the front entrance is off that side road. And that's where you see people sitting out on tables and chairs and things like that. There's also on-street parking in that road that goes to the right. So people pull up in front of it, get out, and walk in the building.
You know, Supervisor Cullis and I actually went there and visited that. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful development. There's different mixed uses in there of apartments and single-family homes. I think what was very impressive was sometimes when you look at a development, because that is an older development, 20, maybe 25 years, so you had a lot of growth in your trees and a lot of growth which, you know, made it have that very country or that very, you know, that aesthetic that you want. But it was an absolutely beautiful development between some apartments, condos, residential.
Single family, a lot of single family. They have some
We were very
alleys.
impressed, like you say, you go in and then you go back in, and there were different levels of the residents. There were some areas in there where there were some larger square foot homes, because not everybody, if you want them to come out here, necessarily needs a small, you know, just a small starter home. So it can be that mixed use, and you would have larger lots and allow for that. It was very attractive. Very, very attractive.
Here's another example of a newer development. This is one story. I wanted to show some things that weren't all multiple stories. This is one story commercial. And again, this could be the road that you're looking down that comes off of Grange Hall. So the buildings don't necessarily, they need to have attractive architecture facing Grange Hall, but where the people interact with it and where it needs the front on the sidewalk is the internal streets.
Now, in that last image, like, where's the parking situation for that?
So there's on-street parking, which probably accommodates maybe 30% of the parking because there's turnover, obviously. And then there'll be some remote parking behind the buildings. And that's another reason why Alexis alluded to the block size. So it's important that you have smaller blocks so people can not have to walk a quarter of a mile to get from the parking lot to the front door of the building, right? So smaller blocks mean you can walk around the block and get to the front door without, you know, too much exertion. This one is not in Michigan, I'll be honest, tell you that. It's in Mashpee, Massachusetts. This one is in Michigan. This is Wixom again. And again, this one is, it's not 100% consistent. You know, you've got the Pontiac Trail here. That I'm surprised they got parking on it, not just parallel parking, but they actually got angled parking on Pontiac Trail. That's amazing. We're never going to get that in Grange Hall. But you can see, again, if you if you consider this road on the right, the road into, the development from Grange Hall, they've got parking on the street there that gives you more direct access to the front of the building there. So if we're gonna go and have a standard that says the building should be built to the street, we should allow on-street parking on those streets. So how do we make sure we get those results? So we need to put the standards in the form of an ordinance, and Alexis can sort of walk you through this. I threw her a little bit of a curveball in the black there instead of the I added where I thought it might apply.
Okay. Yeah, so the graphics on the screen are also included in your packet, and those are excerpts from what is called the SMART code, which is sort of a model for this concept that we're talking about. So we're not saying that all of these are appropriate for this area in Holly, but these are, we can pick and choose whether it makes sense. So
yeah, and I'm sorry.
Please.
And so, as Alexis mentioned, this is sort of a model, and we'll have to come up with other specific graphics that more accurately reflect what we want to see along Grange Hall Road. Because along Grange Hall Road, we know there's going to be some parking located between the building and the sidewalk. So we know there's going to be front yard parking. Just not as much as that first example I showed you, the strip center here in Holly. So there's going to be a limited amount of parking. We know that's a frontage type that we're gonna accept.
Yeah, and so what I was trying to allude to before as well is that we aren't asking you to act on this right now. This would be a companion, a kind of next step after the master plan. And the reason we're introducing it now is because in the master plan for the Rural Town Center, we have it saying the regulating plan will determine the ultimate density and all these things. And so we wanted to sort of start the conversation around this, and at the last meeting when we mentioned the idea of a regulating plan, you said, okay, well, we'd like to hear more about that. And so in your packet, there is a very big, dense table with, it's titled District Standards. It's not in the PowerPoint because it's just, it's just a big, dense table. But this is what it would look like potentially in the zoning ordinance. And what all of these things allude to in the table are what's on the screen. So, like John was saying, we want to make sure that we are very specific in what the standards are and how it's going to look.
Would we pick, well, certainly, we wouldn't do all of that, we might pick.
Exactly.
So you just put, because when I first looked at this, I thought, wow, that's a lot, but
yeah.
This is, well, if we go by our map, what we're looking at, our concept for what we think we want in each one of these areas, and we would pick out, say we're looking at the Main Street mixed uses, and we're gonna look at what uses could possibly go in there, and then out of here, what we would want them to look like.
Correct.
Possibly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Great question.
Yes. May I ask another question?
Yeah, of course, please.
So we're looking at this here, which of course was Riverside. We've had many different plans come before us. So where are we with that?
So we have not received an official submittal from them as of today, right? So, you've seen some concept plans from them. They have told us that they are working on an official submittal, but we have not received that. And we don't want to hold off on them to say,
right.
We want to say, this is what we want this area to look like, which is why we're starting to introduce this so that we can keep moving down this path.
And then they can work around this regulating plan.
Exactly. Yep, that's the idea.
So they haven't asked for this stuff? This is
Nope,
No.
this is
No.
absolutely not.
So, and also there is a chance that we won't get this adopted before they come back. So this exercise that we're doing today, talking about the different frontage types and the different building types, along with the extensive conversation we've had about the density, is so that when they come back and they show a character that is not acceptable to us, one that might look like that garage picture, we say, no, we're okay with the density, but it's gotta look like this. It has to have these characteristics to it, or else it's not gonna work. That's why I'm trying to level the standards in the focus on the density and the character. We don't wanna give them a blank check about the density without tying these standards to it. And we don't have these standards in place right now, but we do have the plan development as a tool that you can apply these standards if we don't get there in time.
So do you think these concepts would actually benefit them as far as, well, making more attractive development, I would say, for overall for us, but is it gonna benefit them, or just something that we're just saying this is all we find acceptable, pretty much?
I don't know.
I look at this map, I look at least half of it is Silverman property, then the rest you have mostly smaller parcels, and I don't know how you'd impose this on smaller parcels unless they sold and combined or something. Because this mainly, what you were showing was something that was several acres, at least in development, to have that kind of concept to be workable.
Some of them are really small.
Are they?
Yeah, two of them are extremely small. Yep, that one that's in Milford is literally a block. It's tiny.
Because not all these places are filled, but several of these places already have businesses on them.
Oh, yeah, and they'll be okay. They'll be, you know,
Grandfathered in, basically.
What's that?
Grandfathered
yeah.
in on what's there, right?
Yeah, but gradually, we've even had conversation with existing businesses that wanna make improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have those conversations, having this to say, okay, if you wanna expand, don't expand backwards, expand up to the front, so we can get the frontage type that we're looking for. They can still expand.
So the thing I find troubling, both Fenton and Bramlike, and there's been other places, allowed or pushed them to put right up to the road. Now, Grange Hall Road is to go, or Main Street, when you go through Fenton, there's no place to expand Grange Hall or Fenton Road. I don't know, and the traffic is much higher. Isn't that a problem in the future? How do they deal with utilities and things like that? You
Yep.
know,
So,
in Grand Lake kind of did the same thing, but they do have a lot of parking behind, which the concept is probably more like what you showed there, is the parking's behind it and the front, but it's, again, right up to the road, so there's virtually nothing between the road and the buildings.
So for starters, with Grange Hall Road, we've had conversations with the road commission to figure out what the planned right-of-way is, and that's where we'll base the setbacks on. Even in that scenario, the physical building improvements will probably be a minimum of, what do we say, 60 to 80 feet away from the, 60 to 80 feet away from the edge of the planned right-of-way.
Yeah.
And so if there is ever an expansion of the right-of-way, first of all, I'm not gonna be around for that. I will not be around for that. But
You're just leaving at that time.
If that does happen, you know, they'll take maybe some of the parking out of the front yard of these uses. And by that time, you know, you want to recognize.
That's why I say Fenton, there's no parking, there's nothing to take, you know, the road is right there, the railroad's on the other side, they're not gonna move the railroad.
Right.
So they've got it constricted as far as I'm concerned through that area,
Yeah.
which is getting very heavily traveled and makes it very difficult to get through Fenton. Anyway, I just don't wanna see that happening, I guess, is the.
So, yeah, it's hard to get through Fenton, but darn it, that's a nice downtown. Come on, you guys like it.
Well, you know, if you wanna go to the next slide, just so we can cover all of our bases. So in the table and what would be in this regulating plan is a differentiation between a public frontage and a private frontage. So the public frontage is exactly what you were just referencing, where the right of way is, where the utilities are, sidewalks, things like that. And the public frontage is, again, how close the building is, what does the front look like of the building, and with traditional zoning, the zoning that we have in place right now, it can kind of, as long as you have the setback and meet the regulations, it can look really however they want. But having some more specific regulations around what this looks like can result in some of that character that we've seen in some of these pictures. And what that character looks like is what Holly says. It's not, we don't have to copy and paste from those photos, but in the master plan, I thought I'd also mention that this is also the Fish Lake traditional neighborhood. So I think when we were talking about the draft text, there was mention that, well, there's a lot of design related things in the master plan. Is that the right place for it? And I think the reason that it is to tie into this. So I know we're not talking specifically about the master plan, you might not have it in front of you, but there are these sub areas that, and these were in the previous iteration of the master plan as well. So this same character has been, in Holly's master plan and in the vision for Holly for quite some time. And this photo, I'm sorry that I'm just trying to reference that these ideas are also in the master plan. These photos look similar to what we're discussing tonight as well. If you maybe want to go to the next slide, these are just some of the things that can be regulated through this tool. So civic spaces, like in the map that we have presented, do we want an open space that is just a lawn, or do we want to see something more formal, such as a plaza or a square? And what's the difference between a plaza and a square? And we want the spaces to be usable and welcoming, a place that people actually want to gather, and it's not just a corner of grass that folks don't actually use.
Yeah, you can see in these examples, and again, we'll go through these graphics and tailor them to fit what is appropriate in Holly when it gets to that time. But you can see, for example, the illustration in the upper left-hand corner is more of what we see with typical subdivisions, and that is, the open space around the rear edges of it, behind the buildings, not really front and center, but more on the perimeter of the development. Whereas you see the second one on the left there, that's more of a central open space, which may be more like what you saw at Cherryville Village. It can be formal or it can be informal. This is a relatively informal example here, but if you look at it, the houses all look across the street at the open space. So that creates an incredible central amenity for the project. People look out on the open space so that there's eyes on the open space. It creates a better sense of community, better sense of safety. All those things go into that sort of layout. And it adds value to the houses that front on it. Same thing in the upper right-hand corner, it's a little more formal example. And then in the lower right-hand corner might be something that you would see organized in the Main Street area, where you have a plaza with tables and chairs out in it, with stores around the edges, as opposed to that being a parking lot. Instead, it could be a more usable gathering place out in front.
Yeah, I particularly like this part of the presentation. Having my wife and I went to Savannah, Georgia.
Oh my God.
And the squares, they're just awesome.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And every square had a different historical monument and historic like fact, so like you were able to read and learn and take a seat, and it was heavily treed.
Yeah.
And had a lot of like shrubs or bushes and like different things at each of them, and just like kind of looking at the dark green areas you put on here, I was thinking like the rectangular one that kind of borders the mixed residential would just be so cool for like a big square, like the Forsyth Square in Savannah is just a huge one, and it has its soccer field and has this and has that. It's just like this big gathering place with all these beautiful amenities there.
And it was busy all the time.
It was busy, but it didn't feel busy. Like it was like there were people just enjoying being outside, because like you take one lap around the square, it was like a mile lap or something.
Yeah.
People would run. It had a tennis court. It had a restaurant in it. It had an amphitheater. I mean, like it's huge. you
Yeah.
know? Like I don't expect an amphitheater in the middle, but
We can bring it up to the developer.
I thought that would be a really cool use for that rectangle there, kind of at the heart of where the different uses would connect. And then like, the greener park space in the large, trapezoid or oblong shape that's kind of on the right, to be more of that quiet,
And the
scenic.
upper left one.
Yeah, like kind of the trails where it stays heavily treed and it's
Yep.
just quiet trails. And I was even thinking, we went to Linden and they had those cool like child story like stops where like along like their walking paths, it's a child story. And so like you're walking with your kids and reading the story as you're outside. So I just thought it's nice that I know that it's gonna be dense and that's some big hunks of land there, you know, kind of set aside, I think, for those green spaces. And if we can make them thoughtful and useful and truly like an area for people to come together and enjoy the outside area without having to travel far to a park or whatever, just convenient for families there, I think that is really cool, so.
I might be somewhat cynical, but really the developer that I would see is what we're gonna get left with wet areas which they can't easily develop, which still is good, but they're not gonna wanna leave big areas that are usable for building houses if they can avoid it, because that's less development, less money they can make off the development.
Right, but again, they get a bonus if they do that.
Well, yeah, I thought that Silverman, the representative, basically kind of said it one time when I was trying to move this, you know, make it more inviting to have larger spaces, whatever. No, basically, you did say it, but make more money by having more houses there. So, and the utilities cost them so much already, and it's just more economical to make more houses on that same, you know, footages of utilities.
Right, because he's not gonna get the density that he's asking for without providing that open space. So you take the houses
They're
that you
pushing
would have put
that.
on the open space, you put them in the development and you get the open space.
And that's my question, is we really think this is important. We really need to do this now before someone comes back with the next proposal. Do something, not necessarily this meeting, but we would want to do this very quickly, because they're gonna come back with something. And, you know, if we wanna really do something like this, it seems like we should move forward really quickly.
It would be great. But as I mentioned, just things, you know, don't always work out timing wise. And we're fortunate that there is the planning development that gives you guys, you know, the control to allow the density that they're requesting and to impose some of the standards that we're talking about.
And I think one of the things we were considering, I just talked about Silverman, is the fact that apartments, and I don't think we were very thrilled with that, but you're saying it does work in some of these mixed developments. Basically what Pam was saying, that it was incorporated, did work out quite well, it sounded like, is the one that you thought.
Oh, yeah.
Now, those mixed use areas along Grange Hall, because I think what we're trying to do is, we're not gonna stop the development, but again, we don't want to make it undesirable, crowded, add to the infrastructure for the roads and everything, where that's been one of the things that we've talked about at every meeting. So these standards that we're looking at, because we also have another rural town center in a receiving zone that's up there, up by Dixie, or not by Dixie Highway, with these standards.
We
fall
will,
into there too. How would that
so we may have,
We got another section where we're looking
yeah.
at a
So-
rural town center.
so for instance, right here, we have 6 different frontage types, right, in this example. We may end up with 5, 3 of which apply here in the Grange Hall, Fish Lake area, and 2 that apply up over in that area.
Because that area near it's not as deep as being right on that Dixie Hike byway,
Right.
right there, going in.
Right, I think probably some of the frontage examples here that we would apply to Grange Hall would also apply to Dixie. So we have the same relationship between buildings and Dixie Highway as we do between buildings and Grange Hall Road. You know, I imagine, you know, we don't want big parking lots fronting on Dixie Highway. We'd rather have maybe a couple rows of parking. But then any road that goes perpendicular to Dixie, maybe you could put on-street parking and build buildings out to that road. But it's not the same scale as this is.
No,
It's
it
much
isn't,
smaller.
but it is there.
So my point is,
It is part of our map, it's part of our future
Yep.
land use, so we should consider it.
100%. So my point is, we'll have graphics like this that apply to both. And it'll be a different map for that area than we have here, obviously.
You had, somewheres in all of this, there was a map, I think, that showed the acreage on all of this. Is that somewhere, or you don't have to search for it now, but I'm, you know, just so if I look at it, I
Right,
wanna look
almost
at
like we
acreage.
can like
I need to, I wanna
a
look
clear
at that,
form
so
for
if you have that, or if you remember where it's at and all the paperwork.
Sure.
It'd be
Yes,
great
I
to
know the
apply.
one you're talking about, and I don't think I have one with me, but we did present it in a previous meeting. It showed, all of the future land use, as well as the zoning, which, you know, is a bit different, and then, for each of those areas, how many acres they are, so.
I think it was 2 meetings ago,
Yeah.
because the last one we got,
I
the
remember
big
looking
packet.
at that, and it might even be in this stuff right now tonight, but just, it's good reference.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to send another copy so it's at the top of our, pile and, so that we can reference that. That's a great point.
Okay.
And just to piggyback off your point before this one, Pam, and talking about the development and stuff, like it's part of our current master plan, so like we can't change that.
No,
but
we
can
cannot.
try to make it exactly how we want it for the feedback, so.
So, like I had said, the master plan is still in its public comment period, and, that will conclude, I think it's a day or two after our next planning commission meeting. So we won't be quite ready, because it's the state required 63 days, to try and adopt, but in July, we're looking to set that public hearing for adoption, and at the June meeting, again, I'll come with comments, any that have been received, so that you all have that, and I'll send them in advance, anything that we've had. But we can keep talking about these ideas so that you all feel comfortable once we get to that public hearing in July to adopt the master plan, and then keep moving on this path of the next step and the next steps.
So looking at the map, the violet purple, the Main Street mixed use, it's broken up into 2 halves. So would like the current Riverside entrance, would that become like a one-way to like flow traffic to the other, I'm assuming? I feel like that, because those are very close together, it seems, those 2 entrances. That could be a little chaotic if we got 2 sets of people trying to turn left or roll in and going all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
So would one be like an entrance only and one be an exit only onto Grange Hall?
You're talking about the 2 access points on the Grange
So
Hall?
like if here and here, like at, you know, if you got someone sitting here waiting to turn left and you got someone trying to turn left out of here and someone trying to go right, or, you know, it just seems like there's a lot going on right there that if this is one way or something like that, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of flow that may flow better. And then if there's angled parking, obviously that's one way. If it's gonna be off that split road.
Right.
Because I imagine that's kind of the downtown area, so to speak, of that development.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely one option, and also the road that's parallel to Riverside is another option. Even though it's never gonna be double-sided, meaning it's never gonna have buildings on both sides, because of the cemetery across the street there. But, it still could be, it could be more of a downtown feel there. But clearly, the side of that purple that faces Grange Hall is where the parking's most likely gonna be facing, at least a couple of rows. Off-street parking, sorry. So what I'm envisioning is maybe some buildings that go up here and then turn the corner like this. So the parking would be located in this quadrant right here. Accessible either from this road here or Riverside.
I feel like aesthetically, I know we don't want the buildings right on the road. We talked about the setbacks, but I feel like going down and through Grange Hall, it would look nicer if we had buildings that kind of mirrored like the downtown village look or whatnot, so it felt the same. And it wasn't like a drive-by and you're seeing a parking lot in a building.
So you remember that, the one image from Cherry Hill Village where there's a building that sort of anchored the corner right here?
Correct.
Between
Yes.
Cherry Hill Road and the road into the development. I could see something like that, so it sort of anchors right here, creates an entrance into this area right here. So from that standpoint, we're definitely gonna have to check out the traffic flow, there's no question.
Yeah.
Because these are very close.
But just even like aesthetically off Grange Hall, because I think, we've got the cemetery there, and then I wanna say it's the next two rectangles there are open. I think it's like 2.5, 3 acres for sale. And then we have the collision center, and then the big plaza.
But I think we can actually designate and say something similar to Cherry Hill. We like the way that entrance is. You've got public and institutional next to it, but that doesn't necessarily mean, if I'm correct, that has to be like that, does it?
What, this right here?
Yeah.
Well, that's the cemetery.
Oh,
So-
okay, can't change that.
No, we're not.
So can I back up? Sullivan did propose a second driveway like you have there today. I thought it was just the Riverside was the only driveway.
No, they did have.
They showed that
road.
second drive in the
Okay.
commercial, they showed that,
The
they would
commercial,
drive through the
yeah.
building, they had
Okay.
that second
All right,
drive.
all right.
There you go. It was all future possible
Yeah.
use that they were saying.
Does the entrance mean, I don't know if you could move that entrance.
I mean, I don't mind it there, I just think the traffic flow, because then you gotta think on the opposite side of the current Riverside Drive where it's all white, you have the one school entrance for Patterson. So, that's why I think it would be helpful if it's like only in, and then we can change the flow of traffic for the school, so the school has it going out on where the light is possibly. So you don't have at school time and after work time, people are coming in and out all different ways. You've got the school getting out and all this and that. It's kind of like right opposite of this here is the driveway to the school. Right this way, so.
Since you got, that's where the outdoor market is. So, that's where the official go, that's the
Yep.
outdoor market. Where's where's the mall, is that it right here?
Two of the parcels in the thing.
Show some of that,
I think that's how it's scheduled,
Yeah.
We have that arcade access.
Those other purple, the dark purple along Grange Hall could have it where, because that's mostly undeveloped, where it still looks and feels like the village downtown, I think, along with fit the aesthetic in the area. For not the, I'm sorry, so there's too many purples. the corridor mixed use, to almost like do.
Because some of it on both sides is already have businesses,
Mhm.
so.
So in this area, you know, I understand the apprehension here with the fact that these are all individually owned and it's hard to coordinate, but there's no shortage of communities that have adopted access management standards, which basically means that we don't want to see another access point here, other than, you know, maybe one that aligned with this road right here. But it really depends on what the road commission says. But my point is, each one of these parcels, we don't want to have a separate driveway out of Grange Hall. So we want one access point in here that provides access to sort of a shallow two-bay row of parking along the front here with landscaping and decorative elements like the fencing that we've talked about that would go along here and promote that rural character of the Grange Hall corridor. And then there may be additional parking located in the back.
That was my first thought, is if they are, you know, maybe if there's no parking in the front, but then there's a side entrance off of Fish Lake to a joint parking area back there. And then it's right alongside the cemetery that people can park in the cemetery as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
And then you're not driving by and just seeing a bunch of cars also parked in front. I think of M59 and Highland. They have, you know, the businesses, and then much of like, kind of like what we were discussing, there's one or two rows of parking, and it's like, it's hard to pull off of 59 and get into some of those, and then it's cramped. You can only fit one car and this, that, the other. So I think avoiding something like that and having the parking behind, I think just makes it look more aesthetically pleasing off Grange Hall, and is safer, you know, or easier for folks to park and all that. Me personally, I think the map is structured well, and how we talked about having the densities closer to Grange Hall and going back with less dense in the rural area. I like the green spaces that are set aside in here. I would like to suggest, or I did have a question, so for the mixed residential, corridor mixed, and Main Street, it says that 3 stories max, but I wanted to ask you, sir, thought we had talked about a few meetings back about the height with the current like trucks and stuff that you have, about any fire issue that we may not be able to service a 3-story building.
Once you get to 4-story building particularly, you would be asking the fire board to consider purchasing a ladder truck. Number of reasons. One, it's the required fire flow that we need to deliver. Secondly, it's the height of the building. That's why you have a high capacity monitor nozzle that can be raised. It also affects the insurance rates of the entire community, because once you get in that category, the ISO rating reviews the type of equipment we have. And we've been able to get by without a ladder truck because of some mutual aid response we get from the village. Once we start building those buildings, that kind of goes away. They were kind of saying, your fire flows are actually large on the big horse arenas and those types of large unsprinklered buildings. We don't have 3- and 4-story buildings to contend with. So when you talk about future planning, that would go into, you know, the type of plan that you're thinking about approving.
And then your concerns for a ladder truck in this ISO change, that was for 3-story and higher, or 4-story and higher?
4 stories.
Okay.
3 stories is borderline.
Okay.
It's borderline.
But not something you feel would be unsafe with current equipment?
If the building was fully protected with an automatic sprinkler system,
Okay.
then I don't believe it'd be an issue. Once you go to 4, it is an issue.
And I'm sure that's something that's current code is required, like a indoor sprinkler, is that, I would imagine it's gotta be today's day and age standard.
More than likely, yes.
Yeah, it
depending on
depends
the
on, it depends a little bit on the use, but yeah.
I know it's done before.
New building.
And then the only other thing for the, I'm just hoping or throwing it out there that for the transfer of development rights, that it get moved to Spring Acre for the town center residential. I think that is kind of the, when we talk about like the 3 dwellings per acre and showing some of the images with the garages in the back, and there, I think when we talked, it was like a 6,000 square foot lot. I think the 2 dwellings per acre would then make it more current, or aligned with the current Riverside development, because I think those are anywhere from 0.2 to like 0.3 acre plots or whatnot, because if you think, 3 dwellings per acre, then we're gonna have all that green space and roadways and all those different things. It's gonna eat into that. So that's just my personal opinion, suggestion. Obviously, we're not making a decision tonight, just throwing it out there. But I think that would actually match better what the current Riverside is. It would actually end up being, 0.25 or 0.3 acres. And I know the public especially has really talked about not wanting it so cramped in that back area. So I think if we can do something cool in the front half, I mean, we're already gonna have Trilogy's working on their stuff, as far as I understand. That's already been, we've gotten to the point we have with them. I think we've got some really good ideas or thoughts for the Main Street mixed use and the corridor, that we can get some of the dwellings, that higher mark in those areas, and it's still be thoughtful and nice, that we can make that compromise in the back end. So it's not the garage in the back with a very small yard and all this and that. I mean, I think that doesn't fit our community. It seems like it's like smaller than the village and some of the images, things like that. I did really like some of the townhouse images, like the ones with it did have like the parking along the back with like dark red brick. I don't know what municipality that was, but
It was
like
like
some. I think that would be a good bridge kind of between the senior living Trilogy facility and like the residential areas, because it will be the same height, or relatively the same height, because I imagine the residential area is going to be 2-story if it's like Riverside, the current Riverside development. So same height, different look, different use, but still fitting kind of within those dwellings. So those are just my couple thoughts. I was really excited to see the green spaces, the possibility of squares and stuff like that. It really would add a lot to that development to be able to have families to go to those areas and enjoy that space. So.
Transfer of development rights, does that have to, an agreement between an area that is your sending zone to the receiving zone, does that then have to be approved through the township?
Yes.
It does.
Mhm.
So if they didn't agree with that amount being transferred or the.
So in order to execute the transfer of the development rights, in other words, in order to build on an area in the receiving zone, they would have to demonstrate that they had reserved or purchased or had an option. So no one's going to purchase development rights outright without getting through the site plan
Something
review
to
and
say.
entitlement process.
If
So
we're
they'll
ready,
come
we
to the
can.
township with a purchase option on development rights in the sending zone.
Good.
And then come before us for approvals on the
Make sure they
plans
meet
and
the unit counts and
things.
make sure they have the right, the layout, character, all that kind of stuff.
and the things that we'll be setting in place with the frontages and the different things in those areas with this.
Yep, and if all goes according to plan, it'll be a much smoother process than trying to negotiate it through the plan development process.
Because it'll be hard set, this is what, these are your few options.
Yeah.
Pick what you like.
Yeah.
Got it. Any other questions, comments? So for the next meeting, do you have any idea of kind of what we can expect, and if we're looking to possibly get some things hammered out and approved, or what do you suspect will come to us for the next meeting?
I think as far as this goes, like Alexis said, you guys wanted to see how we would implement the master plan. This is what we're thinking, so I think we're in good shape as far as this goes. But we probably won't come back to this until after the master plan has been approved.
It's open, I guess.
Well, we should talk about the zoning ordinance process.
Oh, that's right, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of part of the
Then this
bigger.
will go with that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep.
so as soon as possible.
Yeah. And so the next item on the agenda though, we're hoping that comes back at the next meeting.
Okay. So if we have nothing else, can we move on to the next item? Do we feel good? Okay, next item, proposed zoning text amendment, schedule and regulation.
Yes. So going back to the beginning of the meeting, the couple of public comments that we got regarding the Great Lakes subdivision, that's what this is regarding. So to clarify what is going on with all of that, my understanding is that you folks are the ones that have the variance going through the zoning board of appeals. So that application will be going to ZBA. It actually won't be coming to you for a decision. It's through them. But basically, what's going on is in Great Lakes subdivision, which is it's platted much further back than
38.
What's that?
1938.
38. So much further
Long before
back.
us.
Yes, before the zoning plan and the zoning districts were in place, this subdivision existed. And so what happened is, I think John's trying to pull some visuals up for us to kind of demonstrate what's going on here, is that this area was designated as the single-family residential. And what that did is create a ton of non-conforming lots. These lots are much smaller than what is permitted through the single-family residential. And so in your packets is the memo kind of outlining what is currently permitted in that district. It's a minimum lot size of 1.5 acres, which is much larger than a majority of these lots. A minimum width of 150 feet, and then the setbacks, the front being 40 feet, sides 15, and the rear at 50. Now, in your schedule of regulations, which lays out all of those standards, there's a couple of footnotes which try to address lots like this, historic lots of record, which is what they're defined as in the zoning ordinance. And in the footnotes, there's 2 of them that state residential lots of record that have non-conforming lot widths or size may have a side yard with a minimum of 5 feet, with a total of both sides being a minimum of 15. So what that does is it's permitting them to have smaller side yard setbacks. And then there's another footnote that provides relief for the front. So for the front setbacks in single-family districts, the minimum front setback shall be based on the established residential building patterns. So they alluded to what we had done is look at what are the existing setbacks in this area. so that we can understand what would be that established setback, what's the established building pattern. But what the schedule of regulations does not address is the rear setback. So that's why these folks are having to go to the ZBA, because based on how big these lots are, a 50-foot rear setback is, it makes it very hard to develop, and it doesn't follow the existing pattern. And so all that we wanted to do is kind of explain this situation and explain that at the next meeting, we'll be setting a public hearing to make a change to this schedule to provide relief to the rear setback as well. So you don't have the proposed amendment in front of you right now. We'll have that ready for the next meeting, but the idea is that for this footnote that addresses the front setbacks, we're just gonna tweak it to say for front and rear. And, you know, we wanna maintain the existing character that is in this neighborhood. We want folks that come in and buy empty lots to be, we want them to be able to develop in the same type of character, which are smaller lot sizes, smaller setbacks, and, you know, we don't want them to have to buy 4 lots just to be able to build one home. It doesn't fit with this area. So we just wanted to introduce this amendment before we bring it to you officially next month and see if you had any questions.
Cause I thought I read it was consistent in the area that most of the plot sizes or existing were half-acre like lots in that
Yeah.
ballpark.
Smaller.
I think they're
guess.
smaller. It's
Okay.
about closer to 1/3 of an acre.
Okay.
But the current is a minimum of 1.5.
Right.
So what we want to do is, with our amendment, we'll make it clear that what is the existing pattern here is permitted for these historic lots of record. So it'll be specific to these lots that have been in existence. And, you know, it's not going to say in the Great Lakes subdivision, it won't lay that out specifically, but it's to address this issue that has arisen in this subdivision.
This seems like a fairly simple thing, why couldn't we just resolve it now, does it just have to be posted or something?
Yeah.
You're saying you're on the rear setbacks, and so it sounds like it's a very simple, basic thing that
We
should.
have to do a public notice,
Okay,
so
alright,
15
that's fine.
days, and before this meeting, we didn't have enough time to get it into the newspaper, but we wanted, you know, since we're having a meeting, wanted a chance to just, you know, give you a heads up, hey, we're bringing this for next time, and see if you have any questions.
The other thing I would just add is that this area has been recognized in the master plan as an area of significance, both in terms of its heritage and its legacy, but also in terms of its physical characteristics. It opens up just about every planning issue you could imagine, right? It's a highly sensitive natural area, right? So water quality is an issue, but these existing homes are on septic systems. So future development is going to continue to be on septic systems. So, you know, how do you plan for the transformation of this area into one that's more sustainable from people living there on a daily basis without compromising the natural features? And there's just all kinds of stuff going on in this area. So, yeah, a tweak to the ordinance right now to address the rear yard setback, it seems like a no-brainer, right? But there's other issues afoot
But
here.
there's a lot of different lot sizes, even with the different sizes, it's even hard to apply your R1 standards.
Oh yeah, the R1 standards don't work
It's
here.
still, you have a lot of lots, I believe, that are even, they're way less than even 100 feet in width, so.
That's why the SR zoning was put in to encourage the combination, because you can't overbuild there, they don't have the infrastructure, and you don't wanna run that area.
And so this text change, it would only be, it would not necessarily like any plot that wants to, someone that just wants to take a 1.5 acre and split it into 3, because it would be specifically for non-conforming, like oddball lots, like an odd situation. So it would be very, even though it would be a broad stroke in the ordinance, it's gonna be very specific, kind of to help out this area and other areas that are affected similarly.
Right, so, and it would be specific to lots of records, so meaning already existing lots that have existed for many decades and,
Not somebody, as you say, coming to purchase lots or
Right.
whatever.
They bought a
Lot of
parcel
record,
and
can't
make
they
them
do
lots.
two lots put together or whatever? Okay, to make
yeah,
that
any
clear, I think
new
that's an
lot splits
important
have to
part.
follow what's in the main schedule, so, you know, in the zoning ordinance, the schedule is a big table, and that's why the actual change we're making is a footnote to that table, so the table is kind of like, this applies to everyone, and then the footnotes are, well, here are a couple of exceptions, and this neighborhood has many of those lots, so, yep.
So would you still need to get a variance once you did this? Or would this mean you wouldn't need a variance anymore?
You would not need a
You
variance.
have to have the, I would think you'd have to have the ordinance and the text changed before you could move forward.
Well, yeah, but I was just saying, once we get this footnote put in,
Correct.
then really you wouldn't have to go to the Board of Appeals.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yep.
Karen would take care of this.
Yes.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Very good, makes sense.
So we'll bring that, and we'll have a public hearing for the next meeting on that.
So if we did that, from how long before it would be effective?
Well, after the public hearing, it'll go to the township board, and, so, you know, a couple of months, even though this is a minor text edit, even though we're just adding one word, it still has to go through all of these steps. So a couple of months at least.
So August.
No,
Alright.
we would be able to get it on the June agenda, the 19th of June, and then,
Publish it within 2 weeks.
publish it, yeah, within 2 weeks, and then it becomes effective, so, yeah,
Maybe
so
July.
Like I said,
Probably
right away,
beginning
in
of
10
July.
days, I think it's, once it goes to the township board, and then it's published in the select board.
mhm.
So maybe
Is it
July.
7 days after publication?
I forget exactly,
I
but
think it's effective 7 days after publication, and we can get it published probably within a week after the board meeting. So I'd
So,
say
I'm-
end of June, first week
And
of July.
obviously, this one's been a pain in your side for a long time, but do we have other plotted subdivisions in our, this is it, this is the only one, so really this is all basically plotted there.
I know there's a zoning board meeting coming up, is it?
They didn't wanna wait for the text amendment. So they
We are at a crunch time because we have a loan now that is up due. And I thought this was gonna be taken care of in February, cause that's what the township attorney said, come see February, we'll have it all taken care of kind of. And it's running late for, my loan is up to build in so many months, so.
Well,
That-
it has to follow certain procedures, so.
Yeah. So, my question is, are you all in favor of this change, or?
I do think, we do need some changes in that area.
Right.
You know, for the lots of record, you
Right.
know. You know, when you look at putting in a riverside development with having more homes and whatever, but yet you're restricting an area where you could have some homes put in. You know, but it needs to be looked at as a text amendment, and it needs to be looked at in the proper order. And
Right. That's why when I submitted our first one, I went ahead and spent the money on a engineered field and went to, Oakland County Health Department, because they are the ones who ultimately are gonna make a decision whether a home could be built in there because of the infrastructure. And I made sure that where I was putting my septic field and the system that I was putting in, I had enough room with all my other neighbors and all the other development. And whether or not any setback is put in there, it's gonna be the health department who says, you have the infrastructure for a 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom home, or the size of the
well,
lot.
of course, what the health department says to, you know, the building department, you're not gonna get your permits either, or anything
Right.
unless it goes through all that too, so.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Very good, thank you. Moving on to reports. Any reports? Anyone? No? Okay. Our final public comment. Again, the public can come address the commission. You'll have 3 minutes. You can be allotted an additional 3 minutes if so the commission approves. Please state your name and address once you reach the podium, and the timer will begin. And this is for any and all topics. So anyone else for public comment this evening? Hearing none, seeing none. Move to adjourn at 8:20 p.m.
So what is our next meeting?